Well, hi, guys.
Morning, Dave.
Hi, Dave. Here we are again.
Here we are.
We've been at this for 2 years, and it's also special because our duo is now a trio today. We've got Andy Powers. Mm-hmm. Hi, Andy.
Hey.
Chief Designer, President, CEO, Taylor Guitars. I think it's customary and obligatory to ask you some questions like when were you born? Where were you born? Where'd you grow up? What'd your folks do? What do they do?
Wow, that's a lot all in a hurry. I was actually born here in San Diego. I never lived anywhere else. To this day, I live a couple miles from the house I grew up in. Never made it far in life. Now, my parents, they grew up in different parts of California, came down here in the, I want to say early 70s, something like that. My dad really fell in love with surfing. He wanted to come get out of LA where he had grown up and just go be by the beach, go surfing a lot. And that's what he did. Lived in his truck, kind of the original van life sort of thing, except that he couldn't afford it. And so he had to have a roommate in his Toyota truck with a homemade camper. So yeah, he did that and met my mom, and he got really into carpentry. I want to go surfing, and there's work to do here. I can learn to be a carpenter, learn some of that. That seems pretty good. And so growing up, I was around a lot of woodworking, a lot of carpentry, and there's tools around, scraps of wood. So my dad would just bring home stuff. He was cleaning up from his job for the day. He'd throw all the scraps in the back of his truck and unload it into our garage. He goes, well, have at it. Have fun. And so there was a lot of that kind of thing going on in my house. My parents both love music. A lot of their friends love music. And my parents have a guitar. My dad played some mandolin and some dobro. And kind of that country rock sort of thing that came out of Laurel Canyon. I mean, that was a big part of their flavor. So there was a lot of their friends, a lot of our family friends, they all played those sorts of tunes. So that's kind of what I grew up around is, seeing people come barbecue and pass guitars around, a mandolin, a dobro, whatever instrument somebody might happen to have. So I thought, man, this is really cool. I like these songs. I like guitars. I like that they were made of wood. I like the songs that came out of them. I like that feeling of kind of community that comes out of passing guitar around. I think that's a neat thing.
Connection with music was through your folks. Was there a time when your music became your own?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it was. Originally, I started on piano. In fact, that was one of the only instruments I've studied formally for any length of time. Because I played piano. And as a kid, that felt like, I don't know, it feels like an instrument that you study. At least that's how I interpreted it. Mm-hmm. And guitar felt like an instrument that you play. That's fun. This is like eating your vegetables. That's like dessert. And I got into guitars because I loved the shape. I loved that whole thing. And then I got into electric guitars. I got really into the Ventures. Loved those kinds of sounds. It was great guitar music to learn because it was a little more complicated than just, strumming some chords and rhythm parts. But I thought that was like the coolest thing. And so I got a guitar that was an electric guitar and started a band playing surf music, doing that kind of thing, doing the Dick Dale and Ventures, Astronauts, all that kind of music. So I got really into that. And at that point I was like, man, this is my gig. I like this.
What was your first guitar and amp?
Still have the guitar, actually. It was a used Squire Strat. Yeah. It weighs a ton. I think it was a plywood body. I never took the paint off to find out. It worked. It was what my parents could afford. And I was really stoked on it because it looked like the guitar that's on the cover of the Ventures records, that kind of thing. I went, yeah, that's it. That's the sort of the jam. I like that.
And you could make noise with it.
Oh gosh, you could make so much noise. It was awesome. So for a nerdy kid with glasses, that was you're living large.
Yeah.
By then I was really into all the forms of guitar, so I just I thought that was a really cool thing. Got into fixing them, building them, making them, fixing them for the local music shops.
How old were you when you got that guitar?
I'm not totally sure.
7, 10,
No,
12?
somewhere in there.
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember when. It was between
Between 7 and 20?
No, between 7 and 10. Somewhere in there.
Uh-huh.
It couldn't have been 10. It had to have been a little earlier than that.
You were starting to play jazz by 10.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because we had a guitar. My parents had inherited this old Gibson small body guitar. And, man, that was like cool thing. I could hold it. I could play it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was learning all the songs. And then, I had fallen in with some other guys. There's lots of neighbors and a lot of musicians around. They're like, oh, you got to learn that. You're learning these tunes. You're learning this. You're learning that. You should listen to this guy. So I'd go find some cassette tapes, or they'd dub me a copy of some Django Reinhardt tunes or some this or that. And go, hey, listen to this. Try and figure that out. I really liked instrumental music because there was no words to get in the way. So he's like, just guitar playing, So I liked that a lot.
Mm-hmm.
How was it familiarizing yourself with a fretboard compared to a keyboard?
Yeah.
I don't really know. I don't think I ever thought about it.
Okay.
I mean, I could see how they related, but I guess I like guitar because there's so much parallelism in it. The one thing that is kind of weird with guitar compared to something like a piano. On a piano, the range of a piano represents a symphonic orchestra, from lowest note of a timpani to high range of a piccolo, right? But there's only one place where you could play every single note. So you pick a note, add an octave. There's only one place you can actually make that sound. On guitar, there's so much repetition. Like you could play that open high E string on a guitar. There's 5 places on that guitar fretboard where you can play the same note at the same octave. Every one of them has a different tone color because of the length of the string and the weight and all that. But that part makes guitar a little bit different. Mm-hmm. That's a little tricky to get around.
Yeah.
Did doing time on piano help you with guitar?
I'm sure it did.
Yeah.
I'm sure it did. I mean, it's no pun intended, but piano's very black and white. It's very graphically oriented, very visual.
Pun taken, Andy.
I know. It's true. Yeah. So you look at that keyboard and go, well, I can see what's going on here. And so it's easy to make that relate and go, oh, I can learn how to spell chords. That means like learning a jazz tune on a guitar. It's not all that hard because you realize, well, it's a mix of these different relationships between notes. So once you do that, you could rearrange them in any different way and still have the same basic functional harmony. So that was pretty easy to understand coming from some piano.
Yeah, I was curious if you recommended for folks who haven't played guitar yet to get a grasp of piano or go straight to dessert.
Yeah, I think you do what you like.
Yeah.
I mean, I think for a lot of kids especially, you pick the instrument up, just do something that you enjoy. Because if you turn it into a chore, nobody likes chores for very long. You can learn to love it, but why make a person suffer? I don't really, I don't think that's the greatest way to go. Like I've given a lot of lessons to kids, and I've seen some who went one direction with it, and you go, yeah, you're probably not going to play this instrument for a long time. Mm-hmm. And I've seen others take to it and go, you did everything I asked you to do on that first lesson and then some, and you came back with a list of songs that you wanted to know how to play. Great. Let's hit every one of those tunes until you know how this is working. And, some of those kids are out on tour with different bands, things you go, wow, that's cool.
So in parallel with discovering music and really picking up guitar and excelling at it, woodworking is you're learning that in parallel, and how does that
it's just going on. I mean,
with
my parents are a gift. They're two of the greatest people you'll ever meet, and they wanted to give I have an older brother and a younger sister, and they wanted to give us all kinds of opportunities. Well, try stuff. Try things that make you happy. Try things that you might fail at, you might succeed at. Who knows? If you enjoy doing it when you were a kid, why not? Just give it a shot. And so we did a lot of woodworking. My mom was always doing a lot of gardening, and she did ceramics and some painting and flower arranging, all kinds of different things. She goes, my parents aren't afraid of a mess. I go, try it, make something beautiful, do something with it. So I got in. I was really into guitars, so my dad brought home this chunk of scrap wood that was not appropriate for making a guitar, but I didn't know that. So I tried to build a guitar out of it because I thought, that'd be cool to do. And there was nobody around to say, no, you shouldn't do that. So I tried it, and it broke, didn't work. I didn't know what I was doing, so not that embarrassed of it. Tried it again, and after a while, they started holding together. But it was really the kind of environment that let me try those things.
Mm-hmm. Do you impart that onto your kids? I know it's a personal question, but now that the roles
I
changed.
love to.
Yeah.
Where our house is never quiet and usually messy, but we keep a pretty well-equipped workshop. Kids are into it a lot. And it's so funny. Like, I've always been into hot rods. Okay, so I like old cars. I just think that's a lot of fun. Growing up, there's a lot of people around who had toy cars, things that they were tinkering on. And so we've got some of that, and our kids really have taken into that world. So our oldest son, he's 13, almost 14. He's rebuilding an old Model A right now. It's a 29 Model A. You know, he's trying to build this thing into a like World War II era racer. You know, all period correct stuff. I go, really? Wow. You're going even older with this thing, man?
Wow.
Like, okay. Like, he's like, no. We got to find original parts. Okay. You know, lugging home chunks of what looked like rusty scrap iron, watch him spend the whole day, clean this thing up, polish it. He goes, yeah, I think I can make this work. And, you know, he's getting there.
Clearly, you're not afraid of a mess either.
No, fortunately.
Yeah,
it's something I value, actually. It's the mess that accompanies creativity.
There's an interesting, I'm sure, a parallel in how you run a company in that too.
Hopefully it's not quite so messy. We had to, we finally, my wife, she's an absolute saint. She's the smartest person you'll ever meet, but she finally broke down and bought jumpsuits for the kids. So everybody's got like the little mechanic thing. She goes, I'm tired of you guys wearing out all the clothes. She goes, we can't run them through the house washing machine. That's just too gnarly. But it's fun. Like, you know, kids get into what they get into, and you see them thrive in one little spot and go, give it a shot. Go for it. Like, our daughter is one of the more artistic and creative people that I could think of. You see the kind of stuff she'll make. Like, she got really into making beaded jewelry. I don't know a thing about that. I don't know how to do it. I've never once been interested in it. And I came home from the shop, and she's made this pair of earrings and a necklace thing for Marin, and they are so unbelievably intricate. You kind of do a double take and go, really? How'd you how'd you do that? How'd you get it so that this thing lays flat and has this perfectly even, you know, like, wow, that's really neat.
That's funny. It reminds me, you've got 3 kids.
Yeah. Yeah, 2 boys with a girl in the middle.
A girl in the middle. And you were being interviewed at a Guitar Center event a couple weeks ago. Mm-hmm. And you mentioned that you kept an instrument by a front door because of how long it takes kids to get ready to go anywhere.
Yeah.
You actually have more time to play because kids are finding shoes and socks.
Yeah, we don't. Apparently, we don't wear shoes. I don't know where they go. I don't know how. Whenever we try to go somewhere as a family, you go, well, amongst the 5 of us, we have a grand total of 7 shoes, and I've got 2. Marin's got 2, so that means you need to find some socks. You need to find the other shoe. You need to find the other shoe. So yeah, I always kept a uke by the front door, so I could play that while everybody's getting ready. But then again, I came home a couple of months ago, and our daughter had decided that she wanted to play ukulele. So she had ridden her bike down to the library And instead of asking me to teach her some songs, she went to the library, found some archaic book of Nat King Cole tunes, and started to teach herself to play ukulele using that.
Whoa.
Like, okay, great, bring it on. I like me some Nat King Cole trio. Let's have some of these tunes, and she sounds great.
She's good too.
Yeah, she's got good rhythm. She's got all these really tricky, cool chord changes worked out. She's playing along with, some modern country songs on the radio now. Playing some of these old standards. Like, all right, it's my favorite form of music.
Building your family band now.
Yeah, it's so fun.
Do the boys have an inclination towards music at this?
A little bit. Everybody, it's just kind of around.
Yeah,
It's like I've got the piano set up there, and they play around on that. Gwen's playing some ukulele and some piano, and then she discovered the lap steel that's sitting next to the uke. It's kind of in a funny Hawaiian sort of tuning, so I like playing some of that sort of music. It was like, catch her playing around with that. It's just, it's just something that's around. It was kind of a similar experience to what life was like when I was a kid, where the instruments are just there. Mm-hmm. And they become like you almost adopt them by osmosis.
They weren't forbidden; they were encouraged.
Oh. Yeah, they're just there and available, kind of like the tools. Once you learn, like anything with a saw blade, there was a little instruction that had to go along with it. That's why I still have all my fingers. But when the stuff is available, you're comfortable in it. It's not foreign territory. It invites creativity. It reminds me a lot of like Bob's experience, his early experience in shop class. Yeah, you listen to those stories and go, well, was it 13 when you made that cool vise?
Yeah.
Like, that's an impressive piece of metalworking for 13.
Yes.
Like, that's got...
I'm not sure I'd try it now.
right hand, left hand threads. It's got the right alignment on a carver's ball. Like, that's
forged pieces.
It's like, that's a lot of work. But once you're familiar with those tools, you're familiar with the environment, it starts to draw certain creativity out of you.
Just to establish, for the record here, your first guitar that you built violated the laws of physics and imploded, correct? Yeah. Bob, your first guitar still stands?
Yeah, it still stands.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Just want to leave that right there.
Yeah, his still stands. Mine didn't.
But I was
you were
9 years older, 10 years older.
Yeah, you were 10 years older than I was.
Yeah, I must have been 16 or 17, and he was about 7.
Yeah, I was 7, 8.
The guitar I tried when I was 12, I never was able to finish it.
I'm not sure I was able to finish mine either. It was a childish attempt at a guitar-shaped object. My dad had built this mantle for this house. He brought home this big wide piece of wood, and so I wanted to build a guitar, and I worked really hard to figure out how to cut a piece that would be thin and make the top. Got that glued together real crudely. Got a body kind of made. I didn't know that people made things like fret wire. So I took nails and I cut the points off. I cut the heads off, put those in, kind of lined it up next to our guitar and like tried to just eyeball them, see if I can get them in the right spots. I had 6 mismatched tuning keys. I had a used set of guitar strings. Like, you ever try and reinstall a set of guitar strings that were taken off of somebody's guitar? Like, that's a lot
That's futile. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a lot of needle nose plier wrangling.
It's fun how kids learn how to do stuff. I remember, the Kruger brothers are one of my favorite musical duos. Great. And Jens and Uwe, they when they were kids, they lived in Switzerland, and they ended up with this guitar, and they had to share it. And the way they shared it is they would lay it down they'd go down by the river, lay it down on the ground, and Uwe would sit on one side and Jens would sit on the other. They'd play it like a dulcimer, and Uwe would play the bass notes and Jens would play the treble notes, and they'd both go at it. And they would learn how to play songs. And to this day, they play together.
Makes a really good band.
Yeah.
I mean, that is one tight-knit band.
Then Jens got a banjo neck out of a trash can, out of a dumpster, and learned how to play banjo with just a neck, no strings, no body, just imagining the notes and playing it. Kids will, if you let them do stuff, and I talk about that a lot, I give credit to my teachers and my parents for letting me do it, because parents stop kids from doing things all the time.
Right. I guess
other kids stop you from doing things.
That's what I'm trying to say is it takes a set of parents or an environment to go, hey, give it a shot. You don't know what you're doing. That doesn't matter. Give it a try anyway. We're not going to tell you no on that. See what happens.
Yeah.
Just try not to get too hurt.
That is so important. I mean, applying it to business or anything, because you plunge into stuff not knowing what you're doing.
Right. You learn as you go.
Then often the more you learn, the less you learn. The more you learn, the less you take risks. You start getting successful and you quit with the risk taking. You go into protective mode. Andy and I were talking about that just yesterday.
Yeah.
It's like, at what point in time do you quit taking risk to move forward? It was 100% risk when we first started, and a lot of this podcast is talking about the history, and there's a lot of risk taking. It's like, well, what have we got to lose? And then all of a sudden you do have something to lose, and then you start trying to protect it, and then you add bureaucracy, you add requirements that are unnecessary, all this stuff to protect everything. And you have to learn along the way to quit protecting everything and take some risk again, because that's what drives things forward.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I've thought about that a lot in terms of creativity.
Yeah.
Some people figure they've got the creative part done. Now you just kind of protect it and build on it. We don't need more creative energy. I was reading with Andy Summers buying one of your guitars recently. I was reading up on the band a little bit, and Sting deciding to leave that band at their height of popularity, and people thought they were crazy. They're making tons of money, a top band in the world and all that. But he listened to his inner voice. He wanted to do more. He wanted to keep creating. So he went off on a solo projects. Got to admire that with people.
Yeah. And, I developed this little theory that I operated by for a really long time. And it comes at it from a different point. But I like to think of a product and who owns the product. And I think there's 3 stages to the ownership of a product. The first owner of a product is the inventor. They're doing it because they want to. Nobody wants it. Nobody wanted a cell phone. It made you mad to think of having your email in your pocket. People weren't excited about that. The inventor made it and pushed it that way. I made guitars because I wanted to make guitars. I would have paid to make guitars. It wasn't because people wanted those guitars. They didn't want them. Kurt went out and sold them to people that didn't want them, And then you reach a point where this is my theory, where the product is owned by the consumer and the inventor or the maker. And that's the beautiful point. That's where you appreciate each other. You appreciate your customer. They appreciate that you're in business doing it. Thank you for making this. Thank you for buying that, And so you see companies that are like that. Taylor is in that spot now. Patagonia, Apple, you could think about that. And that's a wonderful time. And then the new owner, when something becomes ubiquitous, the owner becomes the consumer. And the manufacturer inventor is just in the way. So what's an example of that? My airline ticket, my cell phone service. I don't care about that company. I'm not thanking them for doing that for me. I just want my cell phone service. Just give me my service and a better price. And then people don't appreciate that they have that stuff, because they really feel like it belongs to the people now. It doesn't belong to that nasty corporation. So that's one thing that's always spurred my innovation or invention along, because I want to keep throwing something out there that I'm doing because I want to do it, because I want to keep starting that cycle over from the beginning. I don't want the things that I'm doing to become owned by the consumer and I have no part in it. And all of a sudden they're like, we just want that. We want it cheaper. Have somebody else make it. Go somewhere else and have it done cheaper. I want to get it cheaper. I want to get it somehow different. You're standing in the way of me getting what I think I deserve. And so creativity there's a practical side to creativity too. And if you want to maintain ownership of this life that you created for yourself, you have to change the game, and you got to start that cycle over. So I've sort of that's given me courage over the years to we're just going to change it up. We're going to change it.
Yeah, you don't want to get to a point where you have to do focus groups to find out what your customers want you to do now, rather than your own leadership.
Yeah.
Absolutely, exactly. I always felt like we as the guitar makers, we have a role in the ecosystem. And that role is to know how to build guitars and then offer what we would like to offer, because we think about it day and night, and we know the nuances. Where do the materials come from? What technologies do we have? What capabilities? What ideas do we have? And then we offer that. And then the musician can take that and reject it if they want, or they can go, wow, I can do something different on this. This is hitting me different. So you see it. Kurt just mentioned Andy Summers buying one of Andy's Powers Electric guitars.
Two of them, actually.
Two of them. Because he picked it up and he's like, this is not like my other guitars. Somebody thought differently about this guitar, and I like what they were thinking. And this could change my music. I can now go use this tool. In our manufacturing, there's new tools all the time. A manufacturer of tools makes something new, and then we discover it and go, oh, my goodness, wow, I could put this to use. I might even be able to put it to use making something I haven't made before. So to me, you've got to have, a spring, summer, fall, winter cycle in life, where seeds grow, you harvest them, things go dormant, you start over again. So it to me, it all fits hand in hand. There's a lot of pragmatism to creativity is what I'm trying to say.
What's especially interesting in your finding this guy to carry that forward. It's not just being able to build a great guitar, it's being able to advance the art and the craft, and not allowing guitars to become, or Taylor guitars to become, a commodity. And just like you described.
Well, yeah, one of the qualifications that I was looking for when I made my my dreaming list of who could come to Taylor and be the next guitar maker was that they'd never worked for a guitar company, right? That this person would have had to have been born to do it, self-taught, original ideas, going at it by themselves, going through all of that type of thing, solving everything. I mean, like what I say is, canceling your weekend plans because you delivered a guitar to somebody and they're having a problem with it, and you're young, and they come back and you're obligated to fix it. You cancel whatever you're doing and you work 24/7 to make that customer happy. At Taylor Guitars, nobody cancels their weekend anymore, right? If you work at the company, Andy might cancel his weekend, to do something that needs to be done. I might cancel mine, But what I'm saying is so instead of me saying, I'm going to take my best protege from Taylor Guitars, who I've tried to impart how we do things, that's a different person than the person who comes in as a kindred spirit, first of all, in the way that they look at things, but they learned it all on their own, which means they are probably brimming on day one with a lifetime of good ideas that they'll have a hard time being able to accomplish all of them because the idea bucket is so full, which is one reason why I'm sorry, inventor, we're not taking your ideas. Between me and Andy, we'll never get to our ideas. We're not going to stop doing our ideas to get to your idea. Even though you have a good idea, you got to go make that yourself. Nobody will believe in it like you believe in it.
Right.
So Andy's ideas are working their way into Taylor Guitars and helping us make better guitars.
Yeah, it's interesting to think about the way that a person goes about doing something. Like in Bob and Kurt's case, they set out pretty early on to go, we're going to make a company, and that's going to be a guitar making company. And so while I feel like I'm very much kindred spirit with Bob and with Kurt, the way that I had approached it was a bit different in that I wasn't really thinking about what you'd call a business side of it. I really liked the guitar. I liked the instrument. I liked music. I liked the people who made music. I really like the people who make music. I like their company. I like working with them. I like being around them. And so having kind of grown up with this, call it a craft-based background, I mean, the people that I knew, they had made a life in just plying their trade. I guess if I were to describe what that business model would look like, it would be a private practice. Mm-hmm. This is the work I do. This is what I make. That's good. I mean, to this day, my dad still does his carpentry like that. He's mostly more retired than not retired these days, but that's just what he did. And so I didn't really even think of guitar making as a business until it kind of hit me over the head. Go, wait a minute. All my friends have got jobs. What the heck am I going to do? I can't quit and go get a job because at the time I finished college, I was a couple year backordered on new instruments, and I kind of got real worried to go, man, I am obligated to all these folks to build these instruments for them because I've taken deposits on them. I can't stop what I'm doing midstream. I got myself into a jam here. This is a problem.
Guitar making became an accidental business.
It was an accidental thing because I was like you. I was going to do it whether I was getting paid to do it or not. I was going to do it.
Andy, take us on the arc from 7 years old, building a self-destructing instrument to what you just described. You're playing. Mm-hmm. You begin repairing out of curiosity, out of necessity. How did you get?
That was really. It was other people being kind to me. Is really what that is. You know, I got into doing something, and people would think it was cute. Like, oh, there's this kid. He's really into guitars. So he made one. Hey, I played it. I played a song on it. That's cool. I've got this old broken guitar. You think you could fix it? And I would say yes, not knowing how to fix it, but I'd say yes, thinking, I can figure that out. I bet you I could. Sure. Let me take it apart and put it back together. I'll see if I can figure out what went wrong. And so I started fixing instruments. And then, those would I'd work on them until they turned out. And it didn't matter whether it took me a week or a month because, it's just an old broken guitar.
You didn't have another option for it.
It's not like I'm charging by the hour. I'm not charging. It's just interesting to learn. Mm-hmm. And so after a while, I started doing repairs for local music shops because they didn't have, staff. No, people had less money then, so they wouldn't necessarily have staff or a place to repair instruments or do woodworking or anything like that. So it was easier to call my mom and dad, and they'd drive me around. We'd pick up the instruments. I'd fix them, drive back. And then I'd build some new ones for family friends, and then their friends, and then friends and friends, friends of friends of friends, and then some professional players. And it just kind of expanded organically.
You still have some of those tools you used?
Oh, yeah, a lot of them. Yeah. A lot of them. In fact, a lot of the old hand tools that I still use in the shop every day were handed down to me from my great-granddad, my granddad, my great-great-granddad. A lot of old stuff.
His great-great-granddad named Arthur Taylor, who was quite an inventor of industrial machineries and techniques, a lot of patents.
Yeah, it's kind of one of those funny coincidental things. My middle name is Taylor, right?
Some people don't believe that.
Yeah, it makes sense. My granddad on my mom's side, their last name is Taylor. He had 4 daughters, and as was the custom here in the U.S., when they all got married, that family name was going to disappear. And so my brother and I both received the middle name Taylor, so we both have 2 family names to keep that name there. And so Bob and I joke about him being half Taylor and me being half Taylor. Mm-hmm. But what's even more coincidental
Together we're a Taylor.
Yeah, we're a full one. Many of those guys, they were either craftsmen in their own right or industrialists, inventors. Like my great granddad, he was early inventor in the world of gasoline engines. That was one of his big things, but building these giant, like room-size single and double piston engines to power a whole factory, all big old giant stuff. But he was one of the first guys to invent what we call a spark plug now. Mm-hmm. Some real interesting things. So I've got a couple of his patent drawings framed on my shop wall, kind of as a nice inspiration. Mm-hmm. It's fun.
So it runs in the family.
Apparently.
Did you charge for your first repairs that you did for people?
No. The first ones I didn't charge any money for because it was just a treat to get to work on somebody else's instrument. Mm. And then eventually I started to, somebody gave me $10, went, ooh, $10. Or it probably would have started as, I had to buy a can of this finish to get this fixed. Do you think you could pay for the can of finish? That kind of thing. And so I stepped into it a little bit that way. Mm-hmm. And then, it turned into something that was more than paper route money. Went, hey, this is cool. I can just keep working on this, doing this guitar thing. And that's okay. And then you start tacking on little pieces that feel a little more adult-like. You get in trouble. She didn't pay her taxes. I got to pay taxes? What?
You were making enough money that you hit someone's radar.
Yeah, that's far enough ago that I'm not embarrassed about it now. I tried to keep that a secret for the longest time. I got a nasty letter from the IRS. And looking at it, going, uh-oh. Ran in the house, showed my parents, and they started laughing. I go, well, what's that mean? What does this mean? What do I do? And my dad goes, well, it means you made too much money and somebody noticed.
Were you 1099 by one of the music stores?
Yeah, that's what had happened.
Okay,
is one of the shops had sent a 1099 in, and
you were 1099. Boy, that sounds official.
It's a verb now. Yeah.
Well, it scared the bejesus out of me because I didn't know there were rules about things like that. I was just doing what I did, and so my mom drove me out to the county office, and I tried to show the guy what do I do, because I don't really have a bank account. I don't have a checking account. I don't know what to do here. And so he talked to a bunch of supervisors and finally slides this letter back across the counter at me. And he goes, I don't know what to tell you, kid. You got yourself a problem. You're not yet old enough to work. You're not old enough to open a bank account. And yet you got to pay your taxes. So you better figure it out. Oh gosh, this isn't good. So that was my more formal entry into the business world.
Welcome to business.
Yeah.
So you went from, I'm sorry, didn't mean to cut you off.
I think I was about 13 at the time.
Wow.
12, 13, something like that.
So you went from repairing to building instruments.
But I'd been building all along because I'd be working on something and go, oh, I'll fix this up. And meanwhile, I'm working on this one. And so a lot of my custom guitars ended up going to people whose other instruments I'd already worked on. They'd come to my shop. I'd be working on their instrument. They'd see something else I was making and go, whoa, could you make one like that for me? Well, sure. Well, could you make it like this? Sure. So, yeah, I'll make that for you. You want the neck wider? Sure. You want okay, yeah. I want the sound to be a little more like that. Okay. So you just start to make what it is they ask you for. And I loved that.
Does having a repair background make you a better builder of new instruments?
I think so. Because when I look at a new instrument, I want to know how it fits in the lineage of what the community of musicians already understand. Right? You think of a repertoire in the world of music. We all collectively know to some degree what songs have been written, what sounds have been made. Some musicians will have one influence more than another. So they'll lean a little this direction or a little that direction. But you've kind of gained this body of knowledge from what's come before you, right? Like, how would it be to pick up a guitar now and go, I don't know what Jimi Hendrix sounded like. I don't know what Wes Montgomery sounded like. I don't know what the Temptations sounded like, or the Beatles, or Django Reinhardt, or, you know, you name a zillion different musicians, you go, that's just weird. That would be like odd to me. To go, you came at the instrument having never heard anything? What kind of music would you make? And so I look at guitar making in a similar way to go, well, I want to understand what came before. And so I enjoyed that a lot. Mm-hmm. So I could see what this builder was thinking. I can see what materials were available, the techniques that they would use, you know, how something would go together, how you might take it apart and put it back together, what you would need to do, how things age, what they turn into over time, a lot of that. So to me, it's been a great learning experience.
Tell me, guys, Bob, before you approached Andy had hit your radar, and you'd made this list that seems inconceivable and impossible, yet here we are.
Yeah, like 5 years earlier.
You guys actually crossed paths and met when Andy was very young. Is that true story?
Yeah, well, when I ran into Andy the second time, and I remembered the incident of running into him when he was 17, but I didn't really know he was Andy Powers. But I had we had a salesman at Buffalo Brothers Music named Kevin Kinnear who would always talk about, I went up and saw one of Andy Powers, went up to Oceanside, saw one of Andy Powers' arch tops. Man, one of the best arch top I've ever played. And he would mention that. And it was just, okay, Andy Powers, who's Andy? You know, I had this mental image of who Andy Powers might be. Mm-hmm. And then Jason Mraz was playing at our booth at the NAMM show in January one year. And I went into our little green room, which was a curtain around the corner of the room, you know, and, mm-hmm. and Jason was in there practicing. Hey, Jason, how you doing? And Andy was playing next to him. He's like, hey, have you met my friend Andy? I'm like, oh, hi, Andy. And he's like, hey. And Andy's dad was there. He goes, well, Andy met you when he was 17. We sat behind you at a Harvey Reid concert at Miracosta College. He tapped you on the shoulder. I think he had a ukulele. He was asking me stuff about building, and we had a nice little conversation. That was our first and sort of only encounter. We knew about each other. We didn't know each other. And I go, I remember that day. I remember that day just fine. And then I'm like, oh, you're the Andy Powers that Kevin tells me about. I came home and I started thinking about Andy making guitars, and my other friend, who's the same age as Andy, Pepe Romero Jr., who makes guitars. Both live in Oceanside. I imagined that they knew each other, knew of each other, didn't know each other that well, you know. They probably surfed the same wave sometimes and, you know, look at someone who might not even know they're looking at another guitar maker. Who knows, you know. But I thought, well, my friends in the business have been guitar makers. These two ought to be friends. So I put together a date, a day-long thing. Yeah, I just called them and said, why don't the three of us get together? Maybe I can help you guys with things that are going on, but, you know, chance for you guys to know each other and us three to know each other a little bit more. That's all. It was as innocent as that. And I said, the only rule is we all have to show up with a guitar that we made, which is harder for me to have a guitar that I made, you know, because I started making guitars in sort of a shop factory situation immediately. So to find a guitar that I made the whole thing, I had to go way back, but I brought one, and it was great. Did you have an arch top, or did you have your 100-year guitar flat top? I think it may have been
I think I brought an arch top.
You brought an arch top, yeah. Andy makes acoustic arch.
I think it was an arch top. I mean, that's usually what I'm playing when I play at home.
And he makes he's not making like L5 jazz boxes when he says arch top. He's making acoustic arch tops like Mother Maybelle Carter would have played. He's making arch tops that he would play in a bluegrass band if he was in a bluegrass band. He's making arch tops, like he says, they make you feel a foot taller as soon as you strap them on. You know, they're loud.
Yeah.
And I just looked at it, I heard it, and Pepe brought a classical guitar, and I had to go back to like a very early guitar of mine. You know, I couldn't bring our newest, brightest, shiniest, bestest Taylor. I just
You brought your 810?
I think I brought a 510 that I made when Robin Clark worked for us, and we made a guitar together because she was going to start doing the training. And I said, we're going to make a guitar. You're going to make one. I'm going to make one. We'll start from the beginning. We're going to make them by hand, and you've got to be able to learn, have some kind of onboarding to what a guitar is. And so it may have been that. It may have been that. And I made that in the early 90s.
I think the guitar you brought that day was Brazilian rosewood on the back and sides. Because I remember looking at it going, I feel a little bit of covetousness there. That's a nice piece of wood.
Jealousy will get you, Andy.
Yeah, I know. We're like, ooh.
Yeah. So
I don't exactly remember. I know it was a flat top. I know it had a cutaway.
What I remember is it was 2 weeks. I went home and I immediately looked at AndyPowersInstruments.com, and it's like, you know, it'd be interesting to open up that page as a place where someone could go from Taylor Guitars to see Andy's early work. This is an idea I'm having right now.
Yeah, I should have kept
in
it
front
up.
of us. But that we could maybe recreate that. But you saw photographically the guitars that he'd made across his career, maybe not every one of them, but a nice slice. Electric guitars, archtop guitars, all bespoke stuff, ukuleles. And it was like, whoa, man, this guy, he really is a guitar maker. He was 28 years old at the time. And he was from San Diego, and he was self-taught, and he's a pro player, and he never worked in a factory, and he's a good person, and, you know, and, right? Like, we're talking all this time and listening to Andy's story, and you think, well, where do you find a guy like that? You know, I mean, you don't find a person like that, and if you do, they're not going to come work for you. If you do, they're not going to come work for you, right?
Well, so share with us how that early discussion went with the notion of Andy joining the team.
Well, from my mind was thinking, okay, now I'm nervous. I feel like I'm going to ask some girl out on a date, and you can't breathe, you know. But I called Andy, and
Were you married at that time?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Maren and I were a couple of years married. Probably 4 years, something like
Okay.
that.
yeah, I emailed him or called him. I can't remember. And said, hey, can you come down? I think I said I want to show you something, or maybe I want to talk to you about something.
I remember it. He sends me this note and goes, hey, I want you to come down to the shop and come alone. That was it. And I just went, okay. It was like something, it couldn't have been more cryptic if it had been in like a Hardy Boys mystery novel or something. Like, I don't know what you're getting on about, because I'm just kind of going through my day. I expected
Andy
it.
didn't have a cell phone.
I didn't have a cell phone. I didn't need one. Why would I want that?
What 28-year-old, 11 years ago, 12 years ago, whatever, 13 years ago, didn't have a cell phone. He didn't have one. So I emailed him or I called him. I can't remember. I must have emailed you.
Yeah, probably.
And he came down. We went to lunch, and I got through all the formalities. And that's when I said, Andy, I got a question. Can you name the guitar maker at? And I named all the guitar companies. And for the big corporations, he goes, no, I can't name the guitar maker at that company. about Collings guitars. Well, Bill Collings, he's the guitar maker there. Santa Cruz, Richard Hoover, he's the guitar maker there, right? Larrabee Guitars, John Larrabee, he's the guitar maker there. Taylor Guitars, well, you and Larry Breedlove together, you work together. He could name the guitar maker, right? And I go, well, and it's probably exactly how you remember it too. And I said, well, much. I don't ever want Taylor get to a point where a person can't name the guitar maker. And my life is finite, right? And Larry is retiring. And I'm not retiring, but I'm the same age, right? So here's my idea. You become the guitar maker, And he's like, he's not demonstrative in his reaction or emotions. Inside, he might have been going, what?
Yeah, it was a little like, yeah, very much. Because, keep in mind, I've never filled out a job application in my life. I've never done anything other than find some work to do. I'll just do that for some people who are interested in me fixing their guitar or building them an instrument or working on this. I like that. And so the thought of working with a company had never crossed my mind. I'd never.
Especially for a company.
Yeah.
No matter how you slice it, when you're going from working for yourself, that's a kind way to put it, as working with a company. But the first reaction has got to be, I'm only imagining, but it's got to be, I don't want a job.
Yeah, it's like, well, that's...
But I tried to make it seem a little bit more important than a job. And the way I described it on that day, because we were approaching our 40th anniversary, Taylor was a pretty strong company. And I just said, and you might remember this, but I just said, Andy, I think Kurt and I have built a foundation that doesn't crumble and a roof that doesn't leak, right? And I came from visiting the state park or the federal park called Bodie, California, which is an old gold mining town.
Ghost town there.
Yeah, it's a ghost town. And what they do is they keep it in what they call arrested decay by fixing foundations and fixing roofs, but they don't fix anything else. But the foundation and the roof will cause a ghost town to turn into dust if it's not well. So I have a foundation that doesn't crumble. I have a roof that doesn't leak. In your career, you could decorate the inside. You could flesh out the inside of what Taylor Guitars is, because it's taken me and Kurt this 40 years to get what we have. Yeah, we make good guitars. We make good guitars, but I'm not enthralled with my guitars. They're good guitars. I like them. I don't like them as much as I do like them. I'm a super realist about our guitars. Look at them. They're wonderful. They're great. Look at these things. They were good then too. I learned on the job, and I built a factory. Well, I've mentioned before, Kurt and I went to see a Mercedes factory early on in our career in Sindelfingen, and I went through that, and I go, these guys built a factory that left no stone unturned. Nobody here knows how to make a guitar. A car. Nobody here you can't take one of these guys and they go make a car. They're making a car with a factory. I could do that too. I could go home and make a factory that makes good guitars. And that's what I did. But I wanted a wellspring. And so that's how I approached Andy. And then he began to think.
Yeah. Initially, that was a bit of a surprise because that's not what I saw coming, and it felt like such a hard left turn because I had a path that I thought I was on, and I had had some success, and my wife and I were pretty happy doing what we were doing, She was doing some work at one of the local universities. I was building my guitars. It was great.
And you were playing professionally?
I was playing. I liked doing that. And I had a lot of flexibility to go like, okay, well, I'm going to record today. That means I'm not going to be in the shop, but I'll be in the shop the rest of the week, and I'll, do that kind of thing. And so I came home that day. It's like, well, Warren went, so what was that like? What did Bob want?
I was going to ask you how that conversation
went. What did he mean by alone?
Yeah.
And I went, well, he wants me to work with them. I forget exactly how I'd said it, but it was something like that, because what Bob had said is,
hopefully I tried my hardest not to come across as I was offering you a job, because I knew you did not need a job.
Right. Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that was true. That's definitely true. Because the way Bob had said it was, well, you're probably the best guitar maker I've ever met. You're a way better player than I am. You have all these things that you've just kind of come up with and developed on your own. This is a place where you could use those. Right.
I did brag about our ability to make. Yeah. I said, if you ever have, somewhere along the line, I expressed that Taylor Guitars could make his ideas, and nobody else in the world would ever be able to make his ideas.
That's true. That was true. We talked about that.
And it's a true statement.
It is. I wholeheartedly believe that.
Well, we see it on our guitars today. Testament to that.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I kind of recounted a bunch of the conversation tomorrow, and she's like, yeah, I don't know about that. She goes, that's not really what you're doing. I go, no, it's not. But I do have a lot of respect for them and what they've built. It's worth at least thinking about and just seeing there's no harm in talking about it. And so we ended up talking about it for weeks. Talked about it for weeks. And then finally, Bob, in the course of one of our conversations, he goes, well, I'm going to put it this way. He goes, in life, we're all given an ability. You're given an ability to think and do something. You've got your experiences, you got your background, you got what you might do, what you're doing now. Call it a gift. Call it a gift, that collection of things, of those things you've learned and put into practice. He goes, where could you use that to its biggest benefit? It's like, right, working the way you're working, you can make a dozen musicians really happy every year. Make their lives better, provide for your wife and your kids, make their audiences happy to get to listen to those instruments. Or you could take those things that you're good at, put them in this context, and provide for thousands. He's like, it would be 1,000 employees that we have whose livelihoods depend on producing those designs. It'd be thousands of people around the world whose livelihoods depend on supplying materials to build those designs out of. Hundreds of thousands of musicians around the world whose livelihoods, even if their livelihoods don't depend on it, they just get to enjoy playing those instruments. Aside from the thousands of people whose livelihoods depend on selling these instruments, servicing them, working on them, distributing them. It's like, what good can you do with what you have? Oh, and you put it that way, that sounds like a pretty good thing to put into practice.
It wasn't money. He was already making money. It wasn't freedom. He already had freedom. It wasn't notoriety. He wasn't fame, wasn't celebrity. It wasn't being a part of Taylor Guitars. It wasn't anything like that. With Andy, the final decision was, it's a better use of my gift. And better is even really the wrong term. I have a feeling maybe just knowing Andy, it was like, maybe it's a more responsible use of my gift.
Right. That's very much what it was, which is, what community could I benefit with the few things that I am good at? how could I use those for the betterment of the people around me? What can I do with that? Because that seems like a worthy thing to spend your time on.
That's totally the truth. That's exactly how it happened. And it was all about guitar building at that time. Andy was concerned. What about the people that work for you that think that they should move into that seat? And I said, don't worry about them. They already know that they're not moving into that seat. They already know it. And I told Andy, and then I remember there was a time we had an E-team meeting, and Kurt and I were both in that. And I said, I haven't done this before in my life, but I get one opportunity to get it right. And I know what I know because I prepared myself to observe and be ready and be aware when the person showed up. And this is the person. You have to believe me. We're not voting on it. It's like my decision to make. I'm hiring this fella, Andy, that you guys don't know yet. And I'm telling you that he's the right person for this. Little did I know, little did Andy know, little did Kurt know that Andy and Kurt were going to develop a very close relationship, and Kurt was going to be able to teach Andy what he knows about finance and administration of the financial part of the company, the marketing part of the company. Soon after Andy started, I remember, Kurt, you said, I don't know where I'm going to find a guy to do this for me, what you've found with Andy, but you found it in Andy. So we used to talk, it might take 6 people to replace what you and I can do together. It ended up taking 1, really. And Andy's not exactly the same as me and Kurt put together, but Andy's Andy. But Andy speaks to Kurt in the language that Kurt loves, and he understands things in the way Kurt understands things. So it just turned out better. It really turned out good.
Well, with you and me, it grew organically. I mean, we didn't know what our roles would be.
Yeah.
Just we did business together, and we each developed, in our own ways, and it worked. So when you think about succession, you kind of naturally think, oh, well, how do we get another you and another me?
Yeah, how do we clone this,
Yeah, which I can see why a person would think that way.
Of course.
But it didn't really work that way. You hired Andy for his role. I didn't think at all in terms of that he would, learn to do what I did or have the aptitude for it or interest or anything. That just kind of came with...
Or have the communication skills that you appreciate, because so much of life is just chemistry.
Yeah, we have to be able to, share things, agree on things. But then getting to know him over the years, we shared interests. I love music, obviously. I'm a guitar player, love music. I love design. I mean, I talk with Andy a lot more about design than I do with you. Love cars, things like that he had an interest in. So we found things that we have in common that we both like. I started inviting him to come to some things that I do, like go to Car Week in Pebble Beach, where you're just fully immersed in automotive design and the culture, which is tons of fun. So we've developed a friendship based on those things.
Yeah, and part of it was when I come into a scenario, I want to see the whole picture wherever I can, because it's interesting. And so when I'd start to build a guitar, when I first came to Taylor, it was a bit of a downshift. It was like a changing gears. We go, wait a minute. I've been my whole, call it career, I've been hyper focused on building an instrument for a player. There was a lot of individuality in that experience.
Who you could communicate with and understand what their needs were.
So I'd sit down with a player and go, let's play. let me watch you play. Let me hear you. Let me watch the way your hands move. Like, what is it? What is it you're doing? What is it you're trying to tell me that you don't have the words to say? What is it that your music is telling me that I can respond to? Now, removing that and going, okay, so now I'm going to design an instrument and build an instrument that isn't individualized for a person, that's generalized for a community of players and the broad variability of their needs. Okay, well, that's different. So I'd build an instrument, go, okay, that's pretty cool. That's good. Okay, I think we can build this one in our factory. This is a makeable thing. Now, how do we talk about it? Call it marketing. How do you convey to players what it is? Its identity, its personality, its characteristics. Some people call them specs, but how do you do that? And so Kurt and I started talking together about that a lot. Go, well, what is it mean for somebody to be introduced to something that is a thing? A thing can have a personality, and it's usually based in its design language. Okay, so if you create something totally new and fresh, how do you get to know that? And it was interesting to learn about that aspect of Kurt's perspective, because it's so well steeped both in time, but in a variety of the things that he sees value in. So we both stand and look at a beautiful painting. You go, okay, well, what does this say? What does this convey? There's no words here. It's just an image. It's not a photographic image. And yet it's conveying an impression of something. And we both see tremendous value in it and tremendous beauty. Why? How? What is that like? And so we started going through some of those experiences, and it was fascinating to see how we take that and go, well, this is why I created, call it an advertising campaign, based on conveying not a product so much as the identity behind the thing, the purpose behind a thing, the philosophy behind a thing. The feeling behind a thing. That was a very original thought. And so that made a lot of sense to me. So I could appreciate that. And wanting to do a better job building an instrument, go, okay, I want to take more of this perspective into account, because I can see that a good instrument isn't just good in its own right. It's got to be good for the people who are supplying materials. It's got to be good for the factory that's making it. It's got to be good for the people who want to go sell that thing. It's got to be ultimately good for the musicians. It's got to be good for in a lot of different ways, for a lot of different reasons. Okay, well, that means that it's not just good for guitar making's sake. It's got to be good for musicians' sake and everyone else.
It's not just a because we can kind of thing. There's a purpose for it.
Or to make a buck.
Yeah, that
like
never
in some
works.
parts of the world, it's just something you can make a buck doing.
Yeah, and that doesn't seem like a worthy use of time or materials. You know, that feels like a waste of just about everything in order to chase some money. If we were going to do that, boy, there's a lot of things I'd make that are not guitars. There's a lot of things that you can make that are a lot easier than guitars, if that's what you're looking for. And so I appreciated that part about Kurt's perspective. And so we developed a friendship over that, and watching kind of the mechanics of, well, you do the physical mechanic work in a factory. You're going to do the physical work of guitar making. Well, what about all the other stuff? Because, you know, one of the first rules of business is staying in business. You know, it's like my dad had taught me some basic things early on. He goes, well, being in business actually isn't that hard. Just make sure that you're not afraid to spend what you need to spend. Don't spend what you don't need to spend, and make sure that the money that comes in is more than the money that goes out. Do those things, you're probably going to be okay. And so I started taking some of that and watching kind of over Kurt's shoulder, go, okay, so here's how you would approach this. You're going to break this down in this way. I could turn that into a physical action in the form of a guitar. That could be good, because it's got to be this thing that we can then convey identity, we can build it, we can deliver it, we can service it, and let people enjoy it. So yeah, that was a really interesting thing. I hadn't anticipated that aspect, but I enjoy it.
Yeah, it's very interesting to me, because early on in our discussions, Bob, you have shared that the not so secret to your success is how the two of you complemented each other and handled different parts of the business, and you trusted each other to do that. So it's interesting that you made a formal list of the things you were looking for, and Kurt, it was just the time spent with Andy, understanding his capacity for understanding the business side of the business, that you didn't have to make a list, but you found your guy in a different way. That's really intriguing to me.
And I give him probably more of the credit that he was receptive and wanted to learn. Because he didn't have to be that. That wasn't what he joined the company to do.
That's right.
No, but I love the company, and I love the people that we have, and I wanted to do everything that I could to maintain the kind of purpose and philosophy that had established the company and grown it to this point. Because I could see that even as guitar maker, I go, okay, I like this, but if there's a different ownership structure in the future, I might not like this so much, because I can see what happens based on the mechanics of how a business needs to work. You see that frequently throughout guitar history. I'm sure other industries are very, very similar. But the type of ownership, the mechanics behind a business, that radically changes the tenor of what happens, of what life is like.
Big time.
Now, no transition is ever easy. But what I wanted to do was take what we loved about Taylor guitars and the thing that's been built, that foundation that doesn't crumble and a roof that doesn't leak, go, okay, it's true, we can build walls out, but that roof needs to get replaced when it does age. And that foundation does need to be fortified. It needs to be kept strong and intact and whole. And there's a chance that won't happen. So we need to do whatever we can to make sure that this stays consistent and true to the purpose and philosophy that established it.
And it would have been a lot harder for me to do my own list and find a person and bring him in and sort out the sharing of power with Andy. That would have been very difficult.
I talk often about sometimes there's accidents that happen or things that aren't super purposeful that cause you to be successful, right? So you make a lot of great decisions. You look at the data, you learn which way to turn. You go, well, your success is built on being smart. Your success is built on being smart and making the right decisions and how good you can become at some things. But, me and Kurt becoming partners was as random as something could possibly be, Kurt's first chosen partner didn't turn out to be a good partner, but the one that got added to it, me, who've heard that story before, we just happened to be able to each have something that we bring to the table that's vitally important, and we happen to be able to get along, because most things go bad when you can't get along. It's just as simple as that. You might have all of the smarts and the power and the ability, and if you can't get along, but we've been able to do that. We've been able to trust each other to, you do your thing, I'll do my thing. And I'm saying that in a really cooperative way. Some people do that as an anecdote for not getting along. Okay, you do your thing, I'll do my thing, which is, I don't like you. I don't really want to you involved in what I'm doing, and I don't want to be involved in what you're doing. No, that's not how it was with Kurt and I. It was like, yeah, if you think that's the way the factory should go, or you think that's the way the marketing and finance and sales should go, of course. And of course, Kurt and I overlapped on a whole lot of other things, that where we had to decide this stuff together. It wasn't two separate people living two separate lives. But we could have a hallway meeting and go, Bob, this is what I was thinking. I go, that sounds great to me. Have at it. Or, so it does make sense that there's one person, not two, because having that happen again,
right,
with two new people,
to recreate that is virtually impossible.
If we start something, well, and we've started a lot of things. If we start something, we start a new shift, we start a new factory, we start a new whatever, we'll usually put 2 or 3 people in it, but they seldom to never end up being the people that are actually running it. I was thinking about that just this morning because I was talking with Ed yesterday about maybe we need another manufacturing point, maybe somewhere else farther from the border in Tecate. And I'm thinking, we're going to put 2 people down there to help do stuff, and they're going to fight. They're going to both go for power. They're going to both do their thing, and chances are they're not going to work cooperatively. And I just thought through, in a flash, I thought through all my experience. So it's unusual that Kurt and I were able to do that. We did it for survival's sake, and we did it because we had pretty good chemistry.
And we started so young. We started so young.
Yeah.
We grew into it.
There's something to be said for starting young. There's also something to be like I have this thought that people don't necessarily live by just the facts of their existence. They live by the narrative that they make of it. They live by how they respond to those things that do happen. Like, let's say one example would be a person gets into a terrible car crash. Okay. And then a series of bad things happen to them. They go, well, I got in this car crash, and so I couldn't get my car fixed, so I lost my job because I couldn't get the job. And then because I had lost my job, my spouse left me. And, and they go, yeah, it was ruined my life. And then someone else might look at it and go, well, I got into a car crash, but it turned out to be the best thing that ever happened to me because it got me out of a dead-end job that was going nowhere. It got me out of an unhealthy relationship. Life is a lot of what you make it to be. You go, yeah, some things happen. Okay, call it a random partnership happened. I don't think it's that random because you were both in the same place at the same time. So there had to have been some sort of similarity in desire, similarity in interest that led both of you, 2 young guys at relatively similar age, to the same spot in the same town.
Mm-hmm.
Same time period.
Same culture, same set of influences. You go, okay, so that's not that random.
Lemon Grove.
Right. And then
random, but unusual. But you see it in bands, Bon Jovi, great band. They're all a bunch of friends, from the neighborhood. How did they get to be, Nickel Creek? They've grown up in the same neighborhood. How they get together, they play, it's not. And then somebody else starts a band and they start taking applications from all over the world to build it. It's one's organic and one's manufactured.
Right. So you end up with this thing. You go, okay, well, you've got that thing. Now, how do you make the most of what you have with that? Go, okay, this happened. Here's how we're going to respond. Oh, that was a setback. Okay, let's figure out how to wrestle over that and go, yeah, let's jump over it. Okay, now moving on. Well, that taught you a lot of resilience, taught you a lot of different things, taught you how to be flexible and work with what it is you got. Right? I mean, one of the more recent, call it recent now, but one of the more recent examples, when the COVID pandemic thing first happened, that was a bad day. That was a bad day. And I think Bob and I, and probably only Greg Denny, rest in peace, were there at the factory. Because I drove down to the factory to go, I don't even know what to do. Okay. Well, and it was rainy. It was March. Bob had drove over to the factory. And so we're sitting there. All the lights are shut off. All the gates are locked up. I go into my workshop. I turn the lights on and go,
what do I even work on?
Okay. I can't bring any materials in. And 20 minutes later, Bob shows up. And after 5 hours of talking more animatedly at each other, we're both basically shouting at each other like, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? What am I going to do? I don't know. What are you going to do? Finally, we both kind of go, okay, well, I'm going to go work on this because we have this material. We've got this. I'm going to go try to do this. And and then Bob goes, okay, that's good. You do that. I'm going to go work on this because we've got this. We're going to be okay? Like, I'm not sure, but we're going to try. Yeah. I don't know what else to do. So let's just try to make the most of this. Let's make the most of what has just happened to us and see how we can navigate forward. And then the next day, Kurt and I are talking. He's like, well, it's going to be hard. Let's see what we can do. Because we've been here before, not in the form of a pandemic, but in the form of we've got almost nothing to work with. But there's some tools there. We can still turn the lights on. We can figure this out in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah, we had a few things like the Great Recession. Before that, in 87 or whenever the stock market crashed, we've had a few of those where the world like stops.
Yeah.
9/11.
Yep.
Also,
well, like our friend and partner Louisa says at Medinter, our partner and friend in our ebony business, she's like, it doesn't matter what happened yesterday. What are we going to do about the situation we find ourselves in now?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and
it's a great perspective.
This is a great way to look at it.
We're in the amplifier business now because of some of that.
As a result of that.
Yeah, exactly.
We have an American Dream series that's out in the market now because of
that's right.
What you guys did during that time.
Got a lot of those guitars made. Got a lot of cool amplifiers
walking
coming
through the shop when nobody's there. Well, the shop, I call it, still is. I mean, it's
many
250,000 square feet.
Big shop.
It's a bigger workshop.
But I'm not even sure I know how to unlock them all anymore. But walking through, just looking at, well, what do we have? What can we do with what we have?
It's like, what's here? Let's make something of it.